Welcome on in, everybody. Today, we're going to be checking out Dagon, which is a narrative-driven H.P. Lovecraft experience. I'm quite the sucker for most Lovecraftian things. Let's go ahead, let's jump right in and check it out. It's a faithful, interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
Ooh, okay. During the game, you will encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey, others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder Sign. You can also access the found facts later. They will be available in the main menu. Okay.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
It's written in the fun old English. That's cool. Okay, so I can't move, but I can focus on things. Now, Windows got a screen in it. We can't quite jump out of it yet. Oh, okay, we
Do
just
not
click.
think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
The game looks really nice, but it is quite narratively driven.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation.
Alright, so now we're
that
on the
our
German
vessel
boat.
was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to troops on the 27th of July 1900, before they embarked to China. Should you encounter the enemy, he will be defeated, no quarter will be given, prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited, just as 1,000 years ago the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention of 1899. It's just a fun point-and-click adventure.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Looks like an ample amount of provisions. I should look around more.
When I found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
We wander eventually, we'll get there. We might not get there alive, but we'll get there.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
Anything I can touch here? Oh, we have some water? That doesn't look
neither
like
ship
enough water.
nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
The worst would be the sun all the
The
time.
change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
That progresses the story. Is there anything else I can look at? No. Okay.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away.
Let's get to the
Though
boat,
one
man.
might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
Okay, one thing, you can tell where the loop animation starts with these tentacles because there's a bit of a stop on the tentacle that comes out. Do you see it? So it'll be like wiggle, 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 stop. Wiggle, 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 stop. It's not over there. That one back there is really good. Like, you can't really tell where the start and end animation is. You can tell where it is for this. These two should switch places.
For there was in the air and in the rotting
Back
soil
to the game.
a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain.
It's all just octopi.
Perhaps I should
And
not hope to
gross.
convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
What is this? Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror and literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in that ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl, and yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in Darkness, Lovecraft, 1927, by Donald Wandre. Neat. That was good. There's good squelching
As I crawled
noises.
into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might. Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
Okay, but hold on, if something was like heaved from the seafloor, I don't think it could casually just float up to the surface. It'd probably be
For
going kind
several
of
hours
fast.
I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and
Or maybe it
afforded a
would.
slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens.
Oh, everything's like more lit up now. We can see everything. There's like fossilized stuff. It's Ammonite. Who's that Pokemon? It's Kabuto.
As
I'm
the
sorry.
day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
I mean, we can just, like, start chopping off some of these tentacles and eating some smackaroonies.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
See if there's anything else I can look at here. I don't think so. Oh, we're just stepping over the... Okay.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
I like this. We're starting to get into some weird stuff now. We're gonna find an abandoned temple? Site of worship? The beached whale? Pretty typical in a lot of
That
any
night,
story
I
derived
encamped,
about
and on the
Cthulhu or the
following day
ocean.
still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
We're starting to get into some, like, these creatures are getting larger and larger.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
Yeah, we did. Let's pick up our
I have
rucksack.
said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
So I didn't know this game was going to be, like, fully voiced. It probably says that on the Steam page. I just don't, like, read anything on a Steam page. I'm like, oh, that game looks
Ledges
cool.
and outcroppings of rock
Download.
afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent. Whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
Time to jump down there, boyo. Camera angles are a little weird because, like, you'll look down and then when you look up, it's kind of like you're, like, looking
Urged
like this.
on by an impulse which I
little
cannot
weird.
definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
Do we go towards the ominous block? Of course we do.
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
The night sky is very pretty.
For
A lot of this
despite
game's
its
very
enormous
pretty.
magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
Our surroundings are we're in a pit with a rock.
The moon,
Oh, and some
now near
water.
the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
The music's just getting more ominous and I'm just getting more stressed.
Unknown to me, and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books. Consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like.
And sharks, don't forget sharks.
Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Looks like the back of like a tarot card or something. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings, journals and characters' notes, islands emerging from the ocean, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies. It also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also include a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men.
Yeah, men with fishtails.
The creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint, grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
I don't think that means they were drawn wrong. I think that means that there's things as large as whales.
Their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
You're doing so good, and then they said Neanderthal. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Neanderthal, like you don't really enunciate the H.
Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception
One thing I
of the
remember
most
from
daring
college.
anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Oh, the
With
rippling
only a
puddle.
slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Oh,
Fearsome and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds.
don't pass out!
Then, of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Ooh. We could work with a little bit more pep in our step, though.
Deal, and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
That was good. That was spooky. That was
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital.
I told you if we just floated randomly, we'd get there
Brought
eventually.
thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing.
They were the ones
Nor
on
did
the
I deem
island.
it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Do I just leave? Oh no. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticisms written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticisms to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again, for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this example excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and, at the proper time, take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is, or ever can be, above warfare, until the basic impulses of the human animal shall be miraculously changed. And now we just leave the
Once I sought
hospital.
out a celebrated
Casually.
ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
I've been pronouncing it right the whole time without hearing it first. Let's go. Dagon was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The ruler of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in a Syrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the ocean. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Is there anything else to look at? What about that plant?
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
Don't want to seem crazy to people that aren't crazy. They'll lock you up. August Derelith and the Cthulhu Mythos. August Derelith was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derelith was a devout Catholic, to the Cthulhu Mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu Mythos was coined by Derelith after the author left the mortal plane. Over to the clock. From one wall to the next, huh? Do we check the time? The bust? Is the time gonna be important? What is it? 1:25? A little before 1:23-ish? Oh no, wait, that's the hour hand. That's the okay. So it's 10:07 ish. Somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe we'll need it for a safe later.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave.
What's the other one? Laundum? Laundum?
So now I am to end it all.
I think it was like a sleeping drug popular around this time.
Or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
Like they would attack New York first.
The end is near.
They'll clutch up on Florida first. Oh.
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Let's go check the door.
Find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Cool. That was fun. That was a fun little game. So that was Dagon. I love Lovecraft stuff. I think every time that a Lovecraft thing is done, I'm nervous to check it out because very rarely is it done well. I think this was done pretty well. There wasn't a whole lot of gameplay, which is fine. You know, not every game needs to be constantly in your face. And I think that's where a lot of games that try to coin in Lovecraftian things miss, is they try to add a lot of gameplay elements to it. Like, the Call of Cthulhu is probably one that comes to mind, where it's good gameplay to a point, but it kind of like shovels you into one path pretty quick, and it's a little tricky to get different endings, and most of the choices you make only really matter at the end, which is a little silly. You know, a lot of Lovecraft stuff should be based on your choices. Do you want to make the descent into madness? Do you not? But this doesn't set you up for that because there isn't a choice. You aren't given a choice because the island shoots up out of the ocean. What are you supposed to do? Just go explore, I guess. You know, we'll figure it out. But I like this. This was fun. This was really, really narrative. I don't know if we'll do too many games like this in the future on the channel, unless they're like oriented towards Lovecraft or more like horror-esque things. I don't fancy myself being too enthralled with point-and-click adventures. I don't really know if I offer too much in terms of commentary while we were playing through. I kind of just clicked through and was really interested. I was really immersed in what was happening. But I liked a lot of... Everything looked really good too, which is another thing. Like, there was that little issue with the octopus, you know, you could tell when the animation reset. But overall, I think it was pretty good. It was pretty fun. It was a nice little one-off experience, and I like that. So hope you all enjoyed, everybody. If you liked, leave a like. If you disliked, leave a dislike, and then comment down below what I can do to improve and do better, because I want to make content that you guys like. But until next time, everybody, hope you all stay safe and take care, and enjoy the rest of your night or day, whatever time you may be in. Till next time, everybody.